Hi everyone, thank you very much for stopping by and for returning to the old world today. We're talking hobby progress and the steps I've taken in the last 3 months or so as I prepare for release of the old world, plus other projects. The last couple of months haven't been the most productive for me painting wise. Few things going on, but I've also had a good chunk of my hobby time taken up with rebasing, and I will touch on that in a moment in a little bit more detail just to get everything underlined. However, there has been progress both for my dwarf force but also for my necromunda game. I've not touched 40k in the last quarter, mostly because, well, 10th edition was widely known to be coming. I didn't want to spend money, time or effort on models that wouldn't necessarily see action on the tabletop. So with that in mind, let's just briefly talk about my efforts with rebasing before we can look at the shiny paint jobs. So we know that 20mm square bases are going to become 25mm square bases, and I'm not going to rehash the arguments for or against. I know people have got their opinions on it, whether they're going to convert their bases, and if so, how they're going to go about it. For me personally, I decided I was going to go down the route of putting them onto 25mm bases. This is my dwarves I'm talking about here. And I'd already put them on 20mm square bases. I experimented with a couple of solutions, but ultimately what I've done is I have stuck the 20mm base onto a Radara 25mm square base. Now, because the models I've been using come from the Oathmark range from North Star Miniatures, the plastic kits of those come with a 25mm base, but it's very, very thin. What does this mean? Well, it means actually by putting a 20mm normal sort of height base on top of it, I'm not adding that much height to the model. And actually, by then basing around the edge, the basing materials I'm using, which is the Mediterranean flock from Game Scenics, has actually blended in quite well, not added too much height to the model, and gives me a 25mm square. I know a lot of people are concerned about compatibility of a 25mm square base with other game systems and older versions of Warhammer. I'm personally not intending to play older versions of Warhammer, and the other game which I have a rule set for, which is a fantasy game, is Oathmark, and that uses 25mm square bases as its default too. So I have, from a personal perspective, compatibility with the two games that I might be using these forces for. Rebasing, however, did take a fair bit longer than I thought it would, so taking a chunk of time out of me painting new stuff. Okay, that is the boring bit out of the way. Thank you if you've carried on listening through all of that. Let's look at the shiny, shiny new models. So the first unit for us to have a look at is this unit of dwarven archers. Yes, I know, heretical bows rather than crossbows or guns. But hey ho, I'm going to be using them as stand for crossbowmen. There won't be anything for them to get confused with, so should be fine on the battlefield. These units, very much a case of stick with the process. When I was putting the base colours down on them, I did find that I really didn't like the colours that were coming out, but sticking with it, which is an unusual approach for me, is to do all of the base coats first, and then I gave the model pretty much a all-over wash of Agrex shade. Don't normally do that. I normally do colour by colour, but by doing that and then revisiting with the original colour, I did manage to achieve a level of depth I'm happy with, and some nice muted colours as well. So I think they work well for being the more craftsman, regular sort of dwarves / rangery types that would be used in the Holds forces. So yeah, I'm pretty happy with how they've ended up, and I've now got 2 units of these done. So the blues and the reds, differentiated by the colour of the flights on their arrows. This is a unit I was just polishing off at the time that the 20mm base thing came into being, and you can probably see little bits of green sticking through from where the bases had been originally painted. I think they've blended in fairly well onto the new base size, and looking at the new models, which are the blues, again they look, I think, fairly good on the 25mm bases, so not overly concerned around that. And I don't think they've added big lumps to it. The models have blended, the basing materials blended fairly nicely. Continuing with the dwarf theme, here we have 10 dwarves armed with spears. Previously I showed you the front 2 ranks of this unit. I've now done the rear 2 ranks. That's another unit of 20 dwarves ready to go. Now I know that in Warhammer, certainly in 8th edition, dwarves were not equipped with spears. They came with hand weapons or great weapons. Although yes, I think in the earliest of editions spears were a thing. Now again, I think these can count as hand weapons, they can count as great weapons depending on what the unit's doing. As long as I've not got spears representing lots of different weapon choices, I can't see this being a big problem. I do have a unit already painted up of 20 dwarf warriors armed with great weapons, so they can be interspersed with those to make it clear what the unit's equipped with. And I don't think we're getting so far away from WYSIWYG then to cause confusion to my opponents that would cause them to have any concern around what I was bringing to the table. So the chainmail here, in fact all the metal bits were painted with the technique I've done a video on previously. It's, yes, I think there's 6 steps to it, including the undercoats, but it's pretty quick and does bring out a good level of depth. So yeah, pretty happy with these being done up to a decent, reasonable tabletop standard. The one thing I would say is I didn't enjoy so much about painting these guys is the shields. And to be honest, that's just because I'm not a big fan of painting shields. Last, but by no means least, for the dwarves this time, is the front 2 ranks of a unit of warriors armed with hand weapon and shield. Very much the similar comments to the spearmen you've just seen, and the drum that you can see comes from a kit of Napoleonic infantry. I think actually marks out the musician quite nicely, so it's been quite a good solution to not getting a musician in that particular box set. For the dwarves going forward, I now have 10 more of these guys to paint up, so that'll be 2 more ranks of hand weapon shield, and then 10 more of the archers. Once that's done, all my core infantry will be ready, and I can move on to other aspects of the army, albeit some of that might get advanced just to break up what I'm painting a little bit. I have got on order at time of making this video 20 dwarf slayers from Highland Miniatures, along with a couple of stone throwers, which I'll be combining with the bolt throwers I've got from when I used to play dwarves back in the day, and a single dwarf cannon for my artillery train. So hopefully some of that will be ready for my next update in a few months' time. Moving on to a different project. Here we have a couple of models from Necromunda. Now, the guy with the, there we go, the bigger gun, he is one of the new plastic ganger models. You've seen a few of those already. not a terrible amount to add to that. This one, however, we just move him out of the way to help focus. Hopefully, there we go, a bit better. One thing I did notice with this, which is one of the old metal Juve models that I have lying around, is how much the models have changed since the old Necromunda. Now, it does say as part of the current fluff that your Jews, your prospect type characters, your new people who are new to the life of a ganger, they could be any age and they've just not got a lot of experience. In the old game, they were youths, and looking at this figure with the slightly plump cheeks, looks about 12, 13 maybe. This model really does look like a child, so I can see why Games Workshop have perhaps moved away from this aesthetic in the more recent game, moving away from the idea of children running around with guns shooting people, because it's perhaps not the best look going forward. Finally, we have some vehicles. Now, these are 2 Orc War Buggies and 2 Orc War Tracks from Warhammer 40,000. In Warhammer 40k, these were a big part of my early days force in 4th edition of that game, where my Orc force was really representing Vanguard, so had a few fast-moving elements, a truck with some boys in it, things like that. But these units have now been given legend status in 40k, meaning they're not really usable. You can use them, but for most play it's going to be difficult squeezing them onto the tabletop, and they're not being balanced as the game goes on. I've been wondering for a while what to do with them, and it struck me that with Necromunda having the Ash Waste supplements out now, this would be a fantastic opportunity to potentially get some life into them. I am actually planning on trying to get some games of Necromunda in, so I'm desperately trying to get my gang all painted up. I've got 3 gangers left to go in order to get my base gang done, and then I can see where I go from there. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see how things develop in that angle. Whether I'll do any particular Necromunda videos, I don't know. If you'd like to see some, let me know in the comments below. But otherwise, I will probably stick to things more fantasy-based, as those do seem to be the videos that people prefer to watch. So that is it from me for this quarter and my hobby progress. How are you getting on with your armies? Let me know in the comments below. I'm returned to the old world. If you've enjoyed this video, do consider liking and subscribing if you've not already done so. Otherwise, thank you for listening. Have a great day.